Hunters. Honestly reckon I've got some really special builds here. I see new melee, essentially new dodge, very much a new dodge, and in my heart I wanted to make these things happen as much as possible, which is what these builds are all about. And having lots of these is great because they're all good abilities, but just from fun factor alone, I keep finding myself drifting back to using these builds for how flashy they look and spammy they feel. Without further ado, your quick builds. On your Void setup, you're using Trapper's Ambush, Vanishing Step, or Trappers on the Prowl. Then Phantom Surge, Grenade is Flexible, class as Gamblers, Fragments are Expulsion, Persistence, Harvest, Reprisal, and with On the Prowl, you have an extra spot, so take Obscurity. Here's your mod setup. Super is Mobius Deadshot, your exotic armor is Speedloader Slacks, and exotic guns I'll talk about in a sec. For armor sets, look for any that have interactions with melees, class, or void. I'll go much more in depth in its own dedicated section. On your solar build, aspects are Crackshot, then either on your mark or GPG. Melee is Knife Trick or Weighted, Grenade is Flexible, but if you're using GPG, take Healing Grenade. Classes Gamblers, for Fragments take Empyrean, Ashes, Char, Singeing, and if using on your mark, take Torches. Here is your mod setup. Super is Flexible, exotic armor is Speedloader Slacks, and exotic gun, again, I'll talk about in a sec, but Lord of Wolves is my absolute favourite here. Armor sets that have interactions with melee, class, or solar are your picks. Again, I'll break this down more in its own dedicated section. You might have heard those quick builds and wonder why I'm talking about two builds of completely different elements in the same video. Reason is, the glue that holds both these builds together and what enables their combo loops is made of the same stuff in Speedloader Slacks. With it, you dodge, reload all your weapons, get tight fit, stacks up 5 times, it gives you these weapon bonuses, very nice. The part of this we care about, and what we build hard into, is the fact that on landing sustained weapon hits, you get class energy back. This part of the exotic though, regarding the energy it gives to your class, is scaled very differently depending on the archetype of weapon you're dealing damage with. And by using guns that break the rules of the archetype they're part of, by being able to land a load of hits, you're able to just fully break this portion of the exotic and turn shooting guns for a couple of seconds into full class abilities. That's going to be your Era Denials, Charge Bolt, Crossbows, Mythoclast, Slayer's Fang, Witherhoard, Anarchy, and that's just naming a few. All of these share between them the fact that they're tied to a frame that doesn't typically land a lot of hits, but because of how they uniquely deal damage through lots of hits, are able to fully bend the rules of Speedloaders. And because Gambler's Dodge is a melee refund, getting back these really quickly means getting back these really quickly. And as both these builds regen abilities from damage rather than kills, they're extremely consistent, very steady, and never have to rely solely on kills to get the gameplay loop rolling. Actually quite weird for builds to get better the harder content gets, but these are ones that do from how repeatable their combos are on big chunky targets. So using everything so far, let's go break the game with all our new toys. Hey Guardian, wanna yeehaw with me? This has got to be one of the most consistent, repeatable ignition builds I've played, and they're literally just ignitions for free. Gun Scorch, Class Scorches, Melee Scorch, and any ignitions you make Scorch. It's all just Scorch, 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 and kabloomies, whilst having this lethally acrobatic and majorly fun playstyle. Just quickly, whenever I talk about Scorch, it's factoring in the extra 50% Ashes applies, because that fragment is non-negotiable and never comes off. The centerpiece of the solar build is our new aspect, Crackshot. When you look over enemies, they'll be marked, and you can mark up to 3. On using your class, your dash in a direction can be used in the air too, and fire off a few goldie shots, hitting your marked targets, with each shot applying 30 Scorch. If you mark multiple enemies, your shots will be spread across all marked targets, but if you only targeted one enemy, all shots will be focused on them. And on landing all 3 shots, you get Cure ×1. This is the ability that makes spamming class abilities worth it. It's good damage, scorches so sets up ignitions beautifully, and really importantly, this works fully with gamblers so every crack shot is a full melee refund. And of those melees, you have a choice of 2, in either Knife Trick or Weighted Knife. In lower end content, I really like Weighted Knife, just because it's much easier to land precision knife kills with Weighted, which gives you your class ability back, so you get into a nice loop of apply Scorch with Crackshot, throw the knife, ignite, which the knife does against hitting a Scorch target, land a precision kill, then repeat. As I take on GMs, I flip between both, as Knife Trick just does very solid damage, although Knife Trick does have a seriously cool interaction with an Armour Set, more on that later. For your second aspect, you have a choice between On Your Mark and Gunpowder Gamble. On Your Mark does everything it did before. You land precision hits and get stacks of On Your Mark, up to 10, with each stack giving +5 weapon stat. Now though, final blows at 10 stacks won't cure you, but rather give you 3 seconds of restoration. With this restoration though, it is only ever 3 seconds. Even if you land kills whilst you have restoration active, it will not go beyond 3 seconds unless you have Imperium. For GPG though, because so much of this build revolves around ability kills, you build this up extremely quickly, and with Char and Ashes it's able to ignition chain extremely well too. That said, aspect choices will affect your grenade, in that with GPG you lose a way to get restoration, so rely on healing grenade, whereas with On Your Mark you can take any nade. For your fragments, depending on if you take GPG or On Your Mark, you'll either have 4 or 5 fragment spots respectively. No matter what, you'll always take Imperium, Ashes, Char, Singeing. This makes it so that solar kills extend solar buffs applied to you, i.e. Restoration and Radiance. This lets you apply 50% more Scorch stacks, and Ignitions now apply 60 Scorch on hitting enemies. Plus, on Scorching targets, you get 400% increased class regen for 3 seconds. You might see the regen this build gets and wonder why this is here, but in low-end content, you kill enemies so quickly that Speedloaders doesn't trigger as often, so it's really nice to have. In the On Your Mark version, you can take an extra fragment, in Torches, or if you're using Deadshot Goldie, Combustion. We have got 2 artifacts though that give Radiant for free, so Torches is less mandatory than it's been in the past. And now for your gameplay. I'll be fully honest, I think Lord of Wolves is the play here. Its regen from Speedloaders is lightning fast, but the best thing is that any ignitions that trigger, where it's originally applied Scorch are damage boosted, and this can go higher from Radiant and weapon stat damage boost. So starting your combo, you should try land Lord of Wolves Scorch onto an enemy first, then melee, or dodge. You really don't need to spend long holding down the trigger either, as Knife Trick and Crackshot, if hitting a single target, both apply 90 Scorch, and Weighted Knife just igniting outright with any amount of Scorch. Although, I'm going to contradict myself slightly, don't get too hung up on this Scorch tech. There's so many places Scorch comes from in the build, plus Char and Ashes which makes Ignition spread Scorch, that quite often you might just miss the chance to get this Ignition damage bump. But where you can, it's free damage for just playing the build well. This is also not to downplay any other guns that have good synergy with Speedloaders, but the amount of ignitions you make with Lord of Wolves really just scratches that pyrotechnic itch in me. For your playstyle, especially with Lord of Wolves, you play aggressive, but you're able to keep your distance from enemies. Basically, shotgun range is ideal, but far enough away that enemies aren't going to be meleeing you constantly. This build doesn't really have a set in stone combo. Again, Lord of Wolves Scorch first if you can, but there's so much stuff that leads to ignitions here, so use what you've got access to abilities wise at the time, and you're going to be igniting a load. In lower end content like Ultimate, relying on Singeing is a nice way to score yourself more class ability regen, with Lord of Wolves having Incandescent on ADSing and Scorching from the hip, making that a very consistent free 400% class regen. If you're using all the tools of your kit well, and never stay unexploded for long, and against enemies that have even a little bit of HP you can do your combo on, you rip off massive chunks of health from enemies like champs, and even some bosses too. And anything with a big health bar also serves like a pyre tower, in that you can spam a load of ignitions off them, which Scorch nearby adds, which makes even more ignitions. More than most other builds, guns matter here for everything I said before, ones that land lots of hits tied to a frame that isn't known for doing so. I won't repeat myself too much, you know the type of guns that you're looking for, but I'll more say that double special can definitely work, but it's something I am much more comfortable doing with On Your Mark for the plus 50 weapon stat, especially when paired up with special finisher, which is one of the ways that you can build out the mod setup. And that's kind of it for the gameplay. Pick up the build, you'll get into the rhythm and feel of what the build does and how it plays quite quickly. Onto your stats, which I also won't spend long on because you've only got one way to run this, and it's as high class stats as possible. 200 if you can, as it buffs Crackshot's damage by 65% and gives you an overshield, which is so nice for staying healthy. Then high weapon stats, ideally as high as possible, then at least 50 melee, with any spare stat points being divvied up between super, grenade, and melee. Taking melee up to 100 stat is really up to you, just depends whether you want melee refunds on using Crackshot to have to be used near enemies or to refund at any range. For your mod setup, the build uses a load of melees and dodges, so takes advantage of heavy-handed to then spend those armor charges on fonts, surges, special finisher, or grenade finisher specifically for the gunpowder gamble variant, with a potential super gem package in dynamo distribution, which gives you 6% of a super on using your class ability near enemies. So your two mod setups might look something along the lines of this. For the surges one, literally just bump off weapon fonts for solar surges if you want damage over the ability to make bigger ammo bricks. And here you can switch special finisher for grenade, although again, only for GPG do you want grenade finisher. I think it's time to talk artifacts because for this build, you are spoilt for choice. Hunter's Journal would otherwise be one I would ignore if it wasn't for one certain artifact that lets you do this. Welcome back, Solar Fulmination. This makes it so that any ignitions will deal another separate bit of damage that applies 40 Scorch. Ashes and Char is already 60 plus Fulmination's 40 makes an ignition. Basically, every ignition makes an ignition, which makes an ignition, which makes an ignition, which makes an ignition, which makes an ignition. Bloody 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 blah, you get it. This one mod makes Hunter's Journal worth it, but for the rest of the mod setup, it should look like this. Only other really noticeable mod is Radiant Orbs, where for just picking up an orb, 10 seconds of Radiant. Fulmination is really that good that I'd take an otherwise okay artifact just for this one mod. Queen's Foil Sensor I then see much more as the generalist, good for solar artifact. Less power in your ignitions, but your solar kit is just generally much better, and you're taking these. The important ones here being Fervor and Chill, where rapid solar precision hits give Radiant for 10 seconds, and Razor Precision, where solar precision final blows cause targets to ignite. Kindling Trigger is great if you are using solar guns, but it does have anti-synergy with Lord of Wolves. All that cool ignition tech I mentioned before is stripped away from Kindling Trigger's Scorch, getting applied before Lord of Wolves' Scorch, and as ignitions are damage boosted from the first instance of Scorch applied to an enemy, it doesn't get any of its damage buffs, so no Kindling Trigger if you are using Lord of Wolves. Queen's Foil Sensor does also have a great strand package, with the star of the show being to Shreds, where on killing a severed enemy, you spawn in an error that just farts out Woven Mail and HP for 10 seconds. So stick Slice on a gun, even better if it's one that synergizes well with Speedloaders like Festival Flight for example, and now you've got Woven Mail in the build too. Do you need Woven Mail? Nope, not once have I struggled in survivability without it, but it's there if you want it. And that's the solar version. If you're here and wondering where armor sets are, I've bundled them up at the end as both these builds share a few sets that I like, so head here. Somehow this is only the halfway mark, so let's get into the purple one. This build has just got the sauce. You're flying into groups of enemies and cutting through. It's got such a cool looking and strong loot to it that plays extremely aggressively for Void Hunter, and for just doing so, is able to stay really healthy from all the new healing effects Void Hunters have just had dropped in their lap. A lot of that is thanks to Phantom Surge, which is your very new, very sleek melee. On using this, you'll phase forward and cut through anything in your path. But what makes this build worth using, and why it's so steady and good at staying alive, is that this gives Void Overshield on hit. That on hit part means when you're going along your merry way doing Speedloader stuff, you don't need to land a single kill and you stay healthy. This overshield scales per enemy's hit, and if you land a kill, it's an instant full overshield plus 50% melee energy back. This melee also deals double damage against void debuffed enemies or enemies marked by On the Prowl, although unfortunately not both at the same time. An On the Prowl void debuffed enemy still only takes an extra 100% damage. For what I would consider to be the go-to that I can always guarantee will be a good aspect setup, Vanishing Step, Trapper's Ambush. Vanishing is giving you invis on dodging, but it now has a unique functionality with trappers. which is essentially a new aspect from its rework. It now eats up class abilities rather than melees, deals much more damage, dealing an extra 50% if you have a void buff applied to yourself, and heals on dealing damage, with final blows now giving you Devour. So a very stacked up aspect and a powerful ability to spam lots with Speedloaders. Vanishing Step though adds to this ability a smoke cloud on landing which will weaken enemies and makes yourself and teammates invis. These two aspects introduce a really self-sufficient loop. Use Phantom Surge, use Trappers, weaken enemies and heal or get Devour if you kill anything, then get invis, and then you use Phantom Surge again, which is now doing over double damage as enemies are also 15% weakened. It's very consistent and has great damage. That said, you can also run On the Prowl Trapper's Ambush as an alternative setup. With On the Prowl, you mark enemies on going invis or just after a short while after being visible, and killing marked enemies releases smoke that weakens enemies and makes you invis, plus gives you grenade, melee and class energy. You also get Successful Hunt, which stacks 3 times and gives reload and stability bonuses. You might ask, why would you use this over Vanishing Step? A good question, I don't really know. I think it is a little weaker, but the pro of it being that the smoke it drops makes you invis and disorient enemies, which is really nice for survivability. But again, that's assuming this build needed more help with its survivability, which it absolutely definitively does not need more help with. If you're just a big On the Prowl fan, just know that it does work really well here too. For Fragments, you're always going to want the same 4 in Expulsion, Persistence, Harvest, Reprisal. With On the Prowl, you get an extra fragment spot, so take Obscurity. Void ability kills now make enemies explode, void buffs last 50% longer, killing weakened enemies make an orb and a breach on a 10-second cooldown, and kills while surrounded give bonus super energy. Obscurity for On the Prowl is really nice in that you finisher an enemy, go invis, mark a target, profit. Right, onto your gameplay. This build lives and dies by its ability to play aggressively. If you can fight up close, you will not have a single struggle staying alive. Devour, loads of Void Overshield, Invis spam, it's tanky like nothing Void Hunter has really had access to in the past. But whenever the game, say, wants you to stand on a point or fight from range, the build just isn't built for fights like that. So be aggressive. The moment that you start to think about playing passively, you're gonna be punished for it. Aggression is survivability here, and playing passive will get you killed so much more than playing aggressively will. Your combo is also one that just forces you to commit to a fight much more than the solo build I mentioned before. So whereas with that one you can kind of stay at a distance from enemies, this puts you right on top of whatever you're going to fight. So if you do need to close a gap, use Trapper's Invis, use On the Prowl Invis, or Obscurity. Once you're in the face of whatever you're fighting, you're golden, you're not going to have any stresses. For mechanics in the build, it's a bit more dumb than the solo one. There's no specific tech to work around here. The only thing I will say is to be careful around using trappers and making sure that it is landing kills, as that's where you get the Devour from. This build does also have access to Mobius Tether, which is definitely what I recommend, because this provides a scaling damage bonus to bow weapons and your second volley when you fire it off, and all you have to do is just deal damage whilst the super is active. Crossbows are guns Speedloaders loves, so for a build that isn't really designed around it, Mobius and crossbow spam is a way for you to push some very solid damage. It ain't killing raid bosses, but it's definitely nothing to scoff at damage-wise. For guns in the build, again, same as before, the stuff I mentioned at the start that works well with Speedloaders is what you're going to want. Moving on to stats. My priority is high weapon stats, then melee, then class, but no higher than 100 for class, with super and grenade being on equal level of priority. This build has a tendency to chew up quite a lot of ammo. High weapon stat means that is not a problem. I would love to recommend high class here, but it has got anti-synergy between Void Overshield from Phantom Surge and the class Overshield. For your mod setup, you're taking this. It's a really nice split between super energy given back on using a dodge, and through heavy-handed is able to feed you ammo through special finisher. And lastly, for your artifacts you have got some good choices here. I think encrypted data disk is probably your best, as it doesn't require you to be using specific guns in order to get some really powerful effects, and you want all of these mods. From this list, your standout mods are Power from Pain, Singularity Blade, and Void Infestation. Otherwise you can go MPA Repulsion Regulator, Slayer Baron Satchel, or Tablet of Ruin. I won't go into full details here because I do think Data Disk is best, but with these artifacts they're much more revolving around Void Guns, Volatile, Weaken, and Void Breaches. Last but most definitely not least, Armour Sets. Just in general, for both Void and Solar, any sets here that provide damage resist are good. Healing is mostly covered in these builds from Restoration, Cure, and Devour. I'm not going to list off every single DR armor set, you're all very grown up and can hopefully all read, so if an armor set says damage resist, it'll be good no matter what for both builds. I do though want to pick out one set, which I have found to be probably one of the coolest, and it works across both the Solar and Void build, which is the Warlord's Ruin set. Whenever you land a melee or sword hit, you get a stack of initiative, which lasts 8 seconds and stacks up 5 times. Each stack gives you reload and handling bonuses. You don't really care too much about that. What you do care about is that per stack of initiative, on using your class ability, you make a little healing guy, and every 2 seconds will pulse out heals, increasing by 10 HP per stack. Making these does not consume initiative and does not have a cooldown tied to it. So for just doing your combo a few times, you can stack up 2 or 3 of these and you just start getting these massive 100, 150 HP heals for doing nothing apart from just your normal combo. It turns these highly aggressive builds into pseudo support ones. A very good set, I cannot recommend this enough. It is difficult to die with this set spewing out as much healing as it does. And now for specific sets for Void and Solar. With Solar, there is one set that absolutely stands out above the rest in the Pit of Heresy one. With its 2-piece, when doing a finisher, you get Regenerative Threshold, and the next time you reach red bar health, you get a small burst of healing and begin health regen. The 4-piece though is what we care about, in that whenever you have a Solar buff, melee hits will cause a small Solar burst to go off that applies 30 Scorch and 40 with Ashes to the target it hits and nearby enemies. Unfortunately with Weighted Knife, it doesn't instantly ignite. My hope was that the knife was going to trigger an ignition from the Scorch that set applied. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. Where it does something very cool though is with Knife Trick, in that the melee applies 90 Scorch, and this set then adds another 40, making an ignition. This adds a whole nother ignition portion to the build, and makes it even more explosive than it was before, especially with Fulmination. The ignition chains you get are things of cinema to watch. For Void, it's slightly less exciting. U-Technology is both a Void Breach maker and lets you cause Void detonations on picking up a Void Breaches. Highly recommend this if using something like Slayer Baron Satchel. This set is online 24/7 with that artifact. And the Root of Nightmares set is a seriously good one too. The 2-piece makes it so that on rapidly killing debuffed enemies, you make an orb, and with the 4-piece on finishing an elite or above, you get Devour, and for just having Devour in general, you get a 20% DR. It's essentially just a free 20% damage resist for doing literally nothing apart from just playing the build. Otherwise, if a set mentions melee, for example the Swordmaster 2-piece or the Crater 2-piece, those are also going to work really well. And we're done! This is a seriously cool way to use all the new goodies Hunter has got now, and like the Speedloaders build before these two, still hits that fantasy that Hunters live for in ability spam and flashy looking gameplay. That is about it from me though. See ya!